Hello, Faith Church. Welcome to another edition of House to House. I have behind me a couple projects we've been working on. You are familiar with the dollhouse. It's getting very, very close, except for the shingles, which are going to happen one at a time over the course of the next 3 years, I'm convinced. But next to it, we have the next project, which Ellie wanted to take on, which was the doghouse. And so now House to House is taking on a whole new meaning in the Shoemaker property. So I'm so thankful to have projects, to have people to do them with. My heart, especially though this week, goes out to people that are living alone. I realize how much, and I am taking it much less for granted, how wonderful it is to have people to shelter with during this time. Talked to several people that live alone, some of which literally haven't had any physical contact with another human being in over a month. Something that we all need, I think, and will long for the day when we can be back together to give one another hugs. Today's scripture is from Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. When the people join together, they get a common language, and they have this idea that they want to build this great city and a tower to the heavens. And God comes down to see what they've done, what they have created, and says, there's nothing that's going to be impossible for them. Essentially saying, there is no sense of relying on me anymore. Let's confuse this. Let's put a little pause in the action here. I had a good friend and pastor who, in a devotional this week, said that if the coronavirus were a punctuation mark, on one hand, it would not be a period. It's not the end of the story for us. Sometimes it feels like it is, but it's not. But it's also not just a comma or just a short breath and then we move on the same way that we had. But it would be a semicolon. And a semicolon is a punctuation mark that necessitates a little bit more of a pause and a shift in focus and moving on in a different way in a thought or in a sentence. And so if the coronavirus was like a semicolon, the idea there is that we have an opportunity to take a pause, to do something very different. I would never go so far as to say that God caused this or brought it by for some reason of God's doing. But I do believe that God can redeem all things, and that perhaps this is a way to remind us, similar to the Tower of Babel, that we have this deep need and reliance on God. Here's one more quote from George Monbiot that I came across in an introduction to a Tim Keller video. And he writes this in a United Kingdom journal where he says, "We've been living in a bubble," not Babel here, bubble, "a bubble of false comfort and denial. In the rich nations, we've begun to believe we've transcended the material world. The wealth we've accumulated has shielded us from reality. We've persuaded ourselves that we've reached the point all civilizations seek, insulation from natural hazards. Now we find ourselves naked and outraged. We might say that the present crisis has shattered our assumptions that the world is generally safe and reliable." And so he goes on to say, to answer the question of where do we go from here, and he says, "From now on, we should expose our minds to the painful realities we have denied for all too long, namely that we are contingent and dependent creatures." The people in the Tower of Babel story, those early people of God, had begun to deny the fact that they are dependent on God. And so part of what God does in that story is to use it as a semicolon, to give them a pause, to go about life in a different way and be reminded that they are dependent on this great God. May we all trust in God together in new ways out of this tragic time. May we come out of it feeling stronger and healthier in spirit than when we went in. Peace of Christ to all of you, wherever you may be. Enjoy the rest of this week.